Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today, we are going to go ahead and continue. And yes, I'm wearing a different shirt, but shh, do not betray the movie magic, okay? But we're going to go ahead and get into this. I put it back basically to where it was last week, and I'm ready. I'm nervous. Let's go.
Scale, and then you actually have to pay extra, or
That's
you
wild.
are not covered under life insurance or different kinds of insurances. So it actually does oppress people deeply.
fucked.
Obviously, psychologically, it hurts everybody because we think fat is bad, and it tells us all that we're really fat. But it doesn't make any sense. But if we could even just take a moment to talk about,
They're talking about BMI, and they're talking about the word obese, apparently, as the chapter says. It's not that everybody is super fat or everybody's hugely fat. It's that a lot of people are. It's taxing a lot of different things, like the healthcare system, like our quality of life. It has a lot of different effects personally, economically, societally, all of it. It's a major, major issue. Even existentially, we are reaching a point where people's kids are having less of a life expectancy than they are. That's not sustainable. So it doesn't really matter what lens you look at it. It's a problem. It is a problem. And I guess she's worried about the feelings or the emotions behind it rather than the reality of it.
the word obese and
Yeah.
obesity right
Please.
now.
Yeah.
It's a great perfect education moment because that word in itself in the fat world right now is not a word that we say or use actually.
Yeah, because you don't want any differentiation, of fatness in terms of being 10 pounds overweight versus 200 pounds overweight. That's why you don't like it, because there is some kind of a gradient established with the word obese, and you want to cloud the issue. And you want to act like if somebody says you shouldn't be fat, that somebody's talking about somebody who's 5 pounds overweight rather than 200 pounds overweight. That's all it really is. It's just a way to cloud the message, because they don't care about if a word is offensive or not. Fat is not fat to them is not offensive, but to the vast majority of people, it is offensive still, even to this day. Obese never has been offensive, maybe a little bit very recently, but not really. It doesn't carry the same cultural weight that fat does. It's just not even comparable, but they're trying to astroturf and switch the words, not because they actually care about what's offensive or not, clearly not, but because one of those words is objective and the other one is subjective. And so they ironically want to keep fat a feeling, even though they constantly say that being fat is not a feeling. That's exactly what they want. So there's a lot of delusional thought processes within fat acceptance, and this is one of them, and a lot of cognitive dissonance, where they believe two opposite things at the same time. And that's what's going on here.
Because it's a very stigmatized word that is
No, it's not.
used in the medical fields and really used to in medicalized fat phobia, which is a whole other world.
Yeah, because heaven forbid we point out the health risks that have to do with obesity. But, as long as your feelings are okay, I guess it all goes away, right?
To talk about.
Talk about that in a sec.
Yeah, but I would love to talk about the word obese because people use it all the time as a horrible
People
word.
use fat all the time as an insult. They do. All the time. I'm sure today it happened millions of times. You don't care about that.
To stigmatize fat people and to oppress fat people, and they think that it's a neutral term, and they say
It is more neutral. It's more objective. It's not they think, it is a more objective term. You think it's offensive. That's what it is.
Have the disease of obesity and
Right.
oh, well, you're obese, like all these words, like what does that even mean? It just means you are extremely unhealthy and you are fat is basically what it means.
It means that you're fat to the point of a medical definition. That's what it means. So people can talk about like what's average or what's maybe slightly overweight or not, right? We can look at it in that way. But when you say obese, there's a specific criteria for that. It's subjective. It's BMI, which is based on height and weight ratio. That's what it's about, essentially. It's more objective. Fatness is subjective. You can feel fat and be thin. You can still feel fat. You can call yourself fat if you're 150 pounds, 250 pounds, 350 pounds. Like, it doesn't matter. It's subjective. It's more of a feeling. I use it on this channel as a catch-all term, an umbrella term for what I'm talking about on this channel, because it's useful in that sense. But it's also used as an insult a lot, even towards people who are not technically overweight. People can be called fat when they're not even actually overweight or obese. So obesity is more objective, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. That's why they don't like it.
But it doesn't help anybody, and it creates like so much shame and so much pain in fat people, which
reality is not, it doesn't create shame to point out what's real. You know that you're obese. You know that you have medical issues. You know, the gaslighting is already starting in this part of the conversation. I know that she has health issues. I know she does. She can try to say she doesn't. She can try to lie about it. It doesn't matter. No, you're not going to lie to me about being that size. I know what it's like to be either basically that size or very near that size. I know what it's like. It ain't it. It is not it. It's unhealthy. It's very unhealthy. And that's the part where I get very angry when I hear these people talk, because they undermine that part and they lie to younger people. And then you get there and then they tell you that there's no way out. It's horrible. It is horrible what they're doing to people. I just, like I said, I could not sleep at night if I was doing the stuff that they're doing. I couldn't. It's horribly evil. It is evil to me. And I know a lot of people are very like extra about that term, but I call it evil because I think it is evil to encourage somebody to get into something like super morbid obesity and then tell them there's no way out once they're in, because it is significantly harder to get out of super morbid obesity if you're in it. So then they tell you, well, you can't. That's just how you were always meant to be. And then they gaslight you and tell you that. It's very, 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 very cruel. I can't think of anything more evil than that. I've always said I would not wish super morbid obesity on my worst enemies. It's awful. And I think a lot of times people like this, they don't want to say how awful it is because they're trying to cope with their daily reality. I don't have to do that anymore. I'm out of it. So I don't have to cope with the reality of being super morbidly obese anymore. I'm not. So I can tell you how awful it is. It is so much worse than even where I'm at today. It is drastically worse. So, like I said, it's about twice as bad as what I currently go through, which is a lot still, as I'm still morbidly obese, although just barely, which is supposed to be impossible, isn't it? According to their gaslight, it's impossible to lose a significant amount of weight. But you'll see, everyone will see on this channel, I will no longer be obese at one point. You'll see it. I've already gone through super morbid. Now I've gone through most of morbid. I'm almost just to obese. Then it's one more step. And then I will be living in defiance of Aubrey Gordon. Just kidding. Okay, let's go.
Ironically, creates often more weight gain and more isolation and more...
It doesn't. That's not true. It's the eating and it's the coping mechanism, the toxic ritualistic behavior that leads to more weight gain, which can be involved with shame, but shame is a trigger. Shame is not the cause of it. That's not true. It's an indirect cause because, as I've stated many times on this channel, it is anxiety. And anxiety can happen for so many different reasons, including shame, but not limited to shame. So she's wrong.
Trauma in a person, which, ultimately oftentimes leads to weight gain.
So it's kind of like a domino effect of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like maybe you go to the doctor and they're like, you're fat, you need to lose weight. And then that makes you kind of mentally spiral.
So this is interesting to me too, because they're kind of acknowledging that it's a bad thing to be overweight, but they also are trying to, on the other side of their mouth, say that it's perfectly fine to be overweight. So is it bad that you're being shamed because you're getting fatter, or is it okay that you're getting fatter because you're being shamed? Make it make sense. This doesn't make sense. Is it a bad thing or not? If it is a bad thing, can you get out of it or not? To which they would say no. So always keep in mind that they frame this like some kind of a Venus flytrap. Like you can just slip into obesity and then you can never get out. Like a carnivorous plant. That's how they act like it is. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. People gain weight all the time. People lose weight all the time. It doesn't make any sense. If you can gain the weight, you can lose it. It doesn't make any sense. But to them, it always only goes one way too. It's very strange. They always act as if you gain weight, you cannot lose it. But if you get too skinny, you can gain it. It's strange. And I don't know if they're unaware of that or if it's just a part of the gaslighting. It's very bizarre.
And then maybe you try a number of different things which don't work and actually makes you gain the weight back, which is statistically very accurate that majority of people who go on crash diets gain it all back plus some.
Crash diets. You don't have to go on a crash diet.
Plus some.
And then you have to go on another crash diet to try to
No, you don't.
counteract that, and then you gain it back, and then it's just like this loop. And then
That is an E followed by the letter D. The one where you eat too much. That's what I'm referring to when I say toxic ritualistic mindsets and behaviors. I'm referring to that. And pardon my coded language, I have to say it in a coded way. But that is what I'm referring to when I say that. That is a toxic ritualistic behavior. That's not normal. That isn't normal weight loss. That's not just going on a slight caloric deficit and losing the weight. That's a whole other cycle. It's a whole other thing. That's what that is.
then also, not to mention like the mental health effects, right? Like maybe you
Yes,
feel
there are mental health effects of having toxic ritualistic behaviors. Absolutely. It is not good for you. It is horrible. So of course you're going to have mental health effects. Okay?
more ashamed, so you want to stay inside more, which means you're being even less active.
Exactly.
And like maybe if you're home by yourself, I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm by myself, I'll tend to eat more. Like if I'm just like at home doing nothing.
And if you want comfort, like food
yeah,
is
and if you want comfort,
comforting.
yeah, absolutely.
Like food is comfort. Food is culture.
There's a lot of different ways to comfort yourself. It's not the only comfort. Look at how she's talking about it too. It betrays your toxic ritualistic mindsets, ma'am.
Culture. Food
Yeah.
is like a hug, right? And if you're being told like, we don't want to see you ever outside. We don't want you in our spaces. And also your doctors are saying like, you need to lose weight. You need to lose weight. It should be your number one priority. All of the all of the
If you get to a certain size, it does need to be your number one priority, because otherwise you're not going to have much time. It does need to at a certain point. I think super morbid obesity is that point. It has to be your number one priority. Once you get out of that, it can be like a co priority. It's a little different. You have more time typically. And then it, you can kind of phase out as you continue to lose, and then you get in a better position. Then it's not as much of a health risk or health scare. I'm not scared anymore. I was scared a year ago. I was scared health-wise. I was terrified 2 years ago. So it's like, it needed to be my number one priority. It needs to be hers as well. But she'd rather stay delusional and wait for the health to completely collapse, which is what happens. It goes very fast. You think you're okay. You feel all these symptoms. You feel all these issues. And then you just kind of chug along throughout the years. And then 1 year, the floor just gives out from under you very fast. And that's what happens to people who are this size. So you think you're fine. You live in denial. This is a serious thing. Supermorbid obesity is very serious. But go ahead and cope. That's what this is.
Of that and the pressure creates isolation. And what really helps people to instantly feel comforted?
It's food.
Food.
Yeah.
Obesity in and of itself is isolating. Supermorbid obesity is isolating because it makes it harder to relate to other people. I know it can be hard for people to understand, but having just left that, it is so much easier for me to relate to other people now, because you reach a point where you barely even feel human when you get that big. It's tough. And you don't relate to people anymore. It's isolating. Nobody can really understand, because the amount of people that have been as big as she is, it's a small percentage of people. It's very small. And it's very isolating. So I think it is horrifically terrible to use food to try to cope with that isolation that supermorbid obesity is causing. It's awful. Don't do it. That's majorly a toxic ritualistic behavior. It's not healthy psychologically. It's deeply unhealthy. And the fact that she's advocating for that, it's, on one hand, it's very delusional. On the other hand, it's very dark. It's sad. It's, I'm trying not to be as judgmental because I came from that place. I know what that's like, but I never advocated for anyone else to do that. Ever. And that part I don't understand, because I always knew it was wrong. Deep down, I knew it was wrong. And I knew that I never wanted anybody else to do what I was doing because it was wrong. It's horrible. And like I said, I don't think people choose to have that issue, but to advocate for other people to take on your mindsets that you know is wrong. It's horrible. And as somebody who's been there, I cannot understand it. And I think it's horrible, because I would never want that to spread. I don't. It's a horrible experience. It's a horrible issue to have. And I don't say that to shame anybody. I just say it to really try to bring to light and talk about the horrors of having those toxic ritualistic behaviors. It's very awful. It's traumatizing in and of itself. So you gotta stop. You have to stop. But yeah, the way she talks about it, it's, they dress it up. They make it seem like it's no big deal. It's a huge deal. Supermorbid obesity is a huge deal. Toxic ritualistic behaviors is a huge deal. And just remember, you guys, it's not an addiction. It's very different. It's a compulsion, which I know it can sound similar, but remember that toxic ritualistic behaviors are much more similar to OCD than a substance abuse issue. Food is not a substance. It's not the same thing. People are very obsessed with that comparison. There are similarities between E followed by the letter D and addiction, but there's a lot of differences too. And remember, body image is always involved. And so there are moments where there isn't even anything involved. Like there is no substance to be had because it's not the same thing. It's something that I think a lot of people don't understand. If you have the kind where you eat too much, even if that person is not actively rapidly overeating in an anxiety-induced state, they still have the compulsion. It just shows in a different way. It never goes away. So even though it can look like it's going away, that person, maybe they're on a cycle where they're starting to lose weight, when the weight returns, it shows that it was never over. It was still happening all along. There was never a time of being sober from it. It doesn't work that way. It's not the same. You're doing it because you believe in it. You believe in it like a chain email. You believe in it like it's very hard to explain to somebody who hasn't been in that situation, but it's like you just feel like if I don't do this, then something horrible will happen. I don't know how to explain it. It's so hard to explain to people who have not had the issue, but it's not the same because it's not actually pleasurable. People say it is, but it isn't. Not when you have that issue, it isn't. Because you often feel horrible the whole time. And whatever quote unquote high you get from the food, it's not actually that dramatic of a thing, for one. And for two, if it is, it's only because there's been significant, usually nutrient restriction prior. And so the body can have a feeling of euphoria from getting those lacking nutrients. And that's the component of it that is somewhat similar to a substance abuse issue. But the whole rest of it, it's not really the same, other than it's usually secret and people deny that they have it. People deny what they're doing. So, yeah. Anyways, I just felt like I needed to say that because a lot of people don't understand it, because you can't fight it in the same way that you would fight an addiction, because it can become that cycle. So you have to kind of not believe in the chain email anymore, right? You have to look at it as, if you don't send this email to 7 people, then you're going to die in 7 days. And you have to defy that and say, I'm not sending it. And then you wait those 7 days and you see that you lived. That's more so what it is. It's different. Because I had the mindset that it was an addiction for years and it never helped. It doesn't help this issue. You have to defy your anxiety a lot of the time. You have to break the mental matrix. It's different. Anyways, let's continue here.
So being fat is so dangerous, not because of the health repercussions of being fat, but because of the trauma that you're going to go through no matter what, especially in the medical fields.
Yeah.
People die because they're fat, and their doctors are not helping them and not getting to the bottom of their problems because they're just so obsessed with telling them that they need to lose weight. And that is like always the root of every problem. You have foot pain, well, that's because you have to lose weight.
Yeah.
What if you actually have like
Something actually wrong with your
issue
foot.
that you need
Yeah.
to get like seen? They don't care, and you have to.
What if it is actually caused by your weight, though? Would you explore losing it? For example, what if somebody brought up your cancer risk? What if somebody brought up, even something like arthritis? Obesity is inflammatory. What if somebody brought up hypothyroidism being caused by extremely high estrogen due to supermorbid obesity? What if somebody brought up hypoventilation, obesity-induced hypoventilation? Then what? Would you lose the weight if you're feeling like you can't breathe? No? What if your high blood pressure is caused by the stress of being that size? What if you have a problem that's caused by the lack of stomach acid due to the hypothyroidism caused by your supermorbid obesity? So you're having issues getting nutrients from the food you're eating. What if you have another condition and it's made worse by your supermorbid obesity? Then would you agree that you need to lose weight? She wouldn't.
Be radical. You have to defend yourself. You have to be ready. Like, for example, I have PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, which
Had a feeling she did. I predicted that in the beginning.
the biggest side effect of that is weight gain and an extremely hard time losing weight. It's a hormonal imbalance, right? I went to see a doctor. I've seen so many doctors, and they're like, the first thing they tell me, I'm going in because I have a cold. I'm like, my tonsils, like, they're so inflamed. They're like, well, it's harder for you to breathe because you're overweight, so the first thing you should do is try to lose weight. You'd get sick less if you
have
were
a
less, like,
cold?
anything. Really, like,
It's true. You do get sick more when you're obese. It's a stress on the body. It's stressful. As far as PCOS, my stance on PCOS is you need to find a mode of treatment. You need to figure out a diet to do. It's a whole other thing. But what I will say is it is a hormonal imbalance, and you need to figure out a treatment for it that works for you. It can be a journey. It's difficult. I don't think there's enough research into PCOS whatsoever, and it needs to be looked at. Personally, I wonder if there is a connection between PCOS and hypothyroidism. I've seen a lot of studies that are looking at that, so maybe in the coming years we'll see a connection, but that's not known at this time. But once again, we need to study it more and understand it better, because I don't think enough time is put into PCOS, and it affects a large amount of people. So what I will say is there are a lot of people who have PCOS that do lose the weight and are able to keep it off. So there is likely something you can do. In her specific case, she also has toxic ritualistic mindsets and behaviors, and the combination of the two can be super difficult. I would understand that, as I had severe hypothyroidism. Now it's more moderate. But I had severe hypothyroidism and toxic ritualistic mindsets at the same time, and it was virtually impossible to lose the weight. You have to address the mindset first. And people don't want to hear that. They want to just feel like they can just take a pill, take Ozempic, do something, but no, If you have the mental side, you're going to have to do that first. Because no matter what you do, it's so much more likely to just be a cycle if you're not dealing with the mental aspect. And she clearly has that, in my opinion at least. I think she has it.
And it's not an exaggeration. What I hate about the online commenters and people, what they say is they think that we're exaggerating because they can't fathom that to be true. But if you live, especially in a super fat body, it is like non-stop. Any problem that you might have, I have a rash, it's probably through rubbing on your fat body, you need to lose weight. It is like non-stop.
Then people don't believe you. And then add on the layers too of like having mental health issues, because that's a huge piece that doctors will also blame things on, is anxiety. And then adding on another layer of
obesity is connected to anxiety and depression. It is very hard to not have anxiety or depression when you are obese, because it causes it. So yeah, that's tough, isn't it?
being a woman or an AFAB person, because doctors don't have very much research on female bodies either. So it's like there's so
the research is not good enough, in my opinion, for PCOS. That I agree with.
Many compounding issues there.
So many layers
You
of
know?
just fucked up. Did you know that they never ever test on female animals or like bugs or anything like that, because they have a menstrual cycle, and for them it's too
So
complicated. So we're just not gonna even touch it.
Well, getting a diagnosis for polycystic ovary syndrome was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
It is an extremely common thing that
It can be hard. I've heard some experiences. So
people have. Also, I know so many fat people who have PCOS. It's like so common. I had a couple male GPs, and thanks to like the internet, I like was so positive I have PCOS.
Yeah.
For example, like you don't have a period for like sometimes ever, sometimes.
I will say she does have some physical signs of having it. I even said it in the first episode, so I did say it. But I also knew too that they would want that for the narrative, so to speak, on their podcast. So, anyways, I knew it for like a couple different reasons.
Sometimes long periods of times, like it ends up having a lot of trouble with fertility in the end. It can lead to cancer, like a lot of things very serious outside of weight gain and outside of like weight. And I really wanted to get a diagnosis because I was pretty positive that not having a period is like not good.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Pretty clear indicator here.
pretty clear indicator. And I remember this really horrible event when I went to go see a GP, and I was like, I need you to test me for this. I need you to test me for this. And he did. And it would come out negative. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm positive I have this. Like, I really was like, I know I have it. And he was like, well, it tests negative. I'm like, can we do it again? So he was like, fine. So we did it again. Negative. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm so sure. My symptoms align perfectly. And he's like, well, you know, maybe, are you looking to have kids anyway? I was like, well, not anytime soon. He's like, well, so then doesn't really matter anyway. Like you know, you can just, it's kind of cool that you don't get a period. Like, he literally said these things. He's like, try losing some weight, maybe you'll see the periods come back. I'm like, what are you talking about? I ended up asking him to please.
That being said, I have heard of cases, I can't think of it. I'm not like 100% on this, but I think I have heard of people, you know, of women losing their period because they're super morbidly obese. I've heard of that. I'm pretty sure. I think it can happen the other way as well. If you're too thin, it can also happen. So yeah, weight is involved for sure.
Please refer me to like.
At least I think. You can let me know if I'm wrong.
Like a gynecologist. So I was referred to a woman gynecologist who told me that it is impossible to get a positive result back when you get tested for PCOS unless you are on your period.
What?
What?
And this person didn't even know that.
Oh my god.
So it is due to my own like ferocious advocacy for myself that I ended up being brought to the right person, and she was like, oh, he should know better. Like, no, this was like many tests of negative, and
that's bad. That's not her fault. I'm not gonna I think that's horrible. So I'm just going to leave that there.
I just knew I had this.
Yeah.
And she gave me a medication that like forced a period to happen. I went right away, got tested, positive result.
All of this is compounded with so many other issues.
Yeah.
Is what I'm realizing throughout this conversations, like fat phobia, with racism, with ableism, but also with sexism and misogyny and
Women's health. Like
women's health, lack of.
I don't think obesity has much to do with any of those things, but they really, really try to force the connection because anybody can be obese and anybody can be not obese. So it has nothing to do with any of that, in my opinion. But the medical system, there are criticisms that need to be made in a lot of different ways, and I'm not going to like say that that's not the case. So I would just say in this part of the conversation, it has to do with issues in the medical system entirely. Like there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. That's it, because pretty much, a lot of people have issues with the doctor. I'll put it to you that way. A lot of people. I have too. I have some stories, I've had a lot of issues with doctors too. I know a lot of people that have. Even things like medical, like medicine authorizations, insurance issues, like all of it. It's a mess. It's a nightmare. So I'm just saying that's a whole other conversation. It doesn't have as much to do with obesity, in my opinion, or any of the stuff. I think it has to do with the medical system having a lot of issues. And that's where I'm going to leave that there.
Knowledge, lack of testing, lack of studying, lack of researching, like so much here that
we could talk about this for like 10 hours and like 10 years, and there's so much more research to be done. And like I make little videos on the internet because so many people like me have gone through this time and time again and don't have anybody that talks about it because it's so shameful, and like God forbid like you talk about your experience of a fat person because everyone's going to comment, well, you deserved that, well, you should know better, you should lose weight. And like it's so worth
I think there needs to be a lot of information about PCOS. Like I always encourage people that have it to, or women that have it to try to share it. Like I think that needs to be destigmatized for sure. Like if there is a stigma about it, it needs to go away because people need to be aware of it. And like I said, more attention needs to be drawn to this issue because it's major in terms of a lot of things. It causes a lot of problems, not limited to just weight gain, which remember, it causes weight gain through hunger and insulin resistance, which is also tied to hunger. That is real. So I don't think it's helpful to not acknowledge that, but we need to really further research on this in general. There needs to be more of an answer about it. It's very shrouded in mystery, and this shouldn't be a mysterious topic. That's one of the things that I want for the future is I want this to be really known about.
Of the harassment that I get sometimes because of the people in the comments that go like, I didn't know that, thank you so much. Like I have been through that too. Like this is not unique. My experience is not unique at all.
It's just invisible.
There's so many people, so few people rather, that are willing to share it also.
I'll just share one more story. When I share them, it really makes people feel like, oh my God, some people are horrified, and then fat people are like, I know this feeling.
Yeah.
So I recently made the decision to have a breast reduction. What I love about body liberation is that, in my opinion, it is like all about doing whatever you want to do with your body, and that you have the right to do that. And I had like a lot of pain, like a lot of back pain, a lot of neck pain, headaches, everything because of my breast size. So I ended up deciding like it was luckily very lucky and privileged. It was covered by the government, and I got that done. But the first time that I met the first surgeon that I met, who it took a year and a half, by the way, to just get an appointment with him, I told him as I entered that I am only interested in discussing my breasts and this procedure as a function, for the function of my life, not the aesthetics.
Right.
And he could not handle that. Like, he was just like, look at yourself in the mirror, and he's like taking my breasts, shaping them into the shape that he wanted me to see, and he's talking about the rolls on the side of my body, and he's like, these are going to be more apparent when you get the surgery, so you're going to have to pay X amount of dollars to get liposuction while you're under the knife.
What?
I think he was like,
Well, they do have an incentive to upsell, which, again, this is kind of a different topic. It's not just related to obesity. But I do find a lot of times when people talk about fatness, they end up talking about other topics because they don't want to actually talk about it. And that's kind of what we're getting into here. This is a different area. Different.
$4,000.
He said it like
He
that?
framed it as like, you
He said
have
you're gonna
to?
have to.
Yeah, so he's like, to get this procedure with me, you have to get liposuction. It's $4,000.
That's insane.
And I said, oh, like, is that for the function, like for the result of the breast tissue, or like, you know, is that so that you get the best result? Like,
Clearly not, because it's not covered by OHIP. It's
covered
not
by OPE.
necessary.
Thanks for saying that, because I didn't really clue that in yet, but I
Yeah.
knew something was suspicious.
Yeah.
And he's like,
That's so shady.
well, like, it's for aesthetic purposes, but we like require that you do that.
What do you mean require? What is this requirement?
So a lot, like, and people who are trying to get top surgery will know this experience even more than people with breast reduction, because a lot of surgeons refuse to do these surgeries on larger bodies. They say it's because it will not produce the optimal result.
What does that mean?
Well, what I've learned over my research the last 2 years of this whole experience is that they mean aesthetically. And they mean that they don't have the experience to make it the result that they are proud of or that they want to do. They will say that it's for function, but it's really aesthetic. And I remember him saying, there could be some complications because of your size. And I asked him, well, what
It's
would
very
the
interesting. It is interesting. It's an interesting topic, too, of like, I didn't think about it in terms of the aesthetic or like the quality of their work and them knowing they can't do it. I do find it interesting, though, how often they want to pressure somebody who's not equipped to deal with, you know, a very, very, you know, super morbidly obese body. They want to pressure them to do surgery on it anyways, or to do surgery on their body anyways. I find that strange because I wouldn't be comfortable with getting a surgery if somebody did not have the experience or was not able to handle a surgery on my body. That would freak me out. I think in terms of the aesthetic side, they're also worried about regret from the patient, because I think that can be major in that line of work. That's just my speculation as well. I think that's another side to it, because if somebody is unsatisfied with it, you can't really go back. It's a whole other thing, right? It's like a big issue. And I'm not super well versed in this because, again, as far as like plastic surgery and things like that, I don't think it's completely relevant to super morbid obesity or to obesity in and of itself. What I do find interesting is that she can view her breasts as being an issue because they're too heavy, but she can't view any other part of her body being an issue because it's too heavy. That's a leap I didn't quite see this person taking. But here we are.
complications be? And he couldn't tell me.
You should think about turning your voice notes on during these sessions, just
Well-
in terms of like having proof of like bullshit that they say, because some of it's like bordering misconduct.
It seems like, is that
it
legal?
Yeah.
I've had multiple
Yeah.
doctor's appointments that I believe I could write
Yeah.
a complaint and like potentially like really
Sue
have
them?
somebody sued. Yeah.
Yeah.
Many times. I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of fat people have.
Yeah.
But he was so like flustered with my questions, and he felt like I was being combative, I think, and his pride and his ego got in the way, that he ended up saying the most like violent fatphobic stuff to me to just, I believed, make me like shut up. And he was like, well, you know, you could die of this, you can die of this, you can die of this. And he just like started spitting all these things at me. And then he goes, and you know, if you want to have the best result possible, then you should consider losing a significant amount of weight. I said, okay. At this point, I'm like, we're sparring, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so you say like the after today, it could take how many months until I get the surgery? He said 2 months. I'm like, so how much weight do you think I should lose in 2 months for the ideal result? He goes, 100 pounds.
In 2 months.
What?
That's weird. So weird conversation. I think that would have been one hell of a recording because I think it would have been so weird on both sides of that. But wow.
What?
He knows that's not possible.
Or healthy.
He just
a
wanted
doctor
me-
recommending
no.
that.
And extremely dangerous to even say that.
Yeah, so I ended up, like, I was so proud of myself because
Yeah.
it was such a long wait to even meet anybody in the first place, and I've been so desperately needing this to happen because it's so
Yeah.
painful. But I decided I am not going to go under the knife with this man. I don't care how desperate
Glad
I
you
am.
decided
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I told him no, and I waited another year for another person. I met this woman who ended up being my surgeon in the end. And when I went to meet her, I was like, the last surgeon and I, like, we discussed, like, I have to pay lipo, like, for the size. Do I have to do that? And she's like, no. She's like, no,
God.
we can if you want. That's aesthetic, though. And she's like, I just want you to know that the reason we offer that is because some people are not used to seeing that they have, like, rolls on their sides. And, like, aesthetically, they're unhappy to see that because their breasts are smaller now, so you can, like, see that. And I'm like, oh, I know they're there. Like, I'm good with that. She's like, yeah, no, we don't need to do that at all. It's not important. I'm like,
So what? This other doctor put up a fight just so that he could get what he wanted aesthetically?
Yeah.
Like, is it his own personal vision of what
Yeah.
you should look
His
like?
portfolio.
His own
Yeah.
fat phobia of wanting
Yeah.
to control your body is like what it feels like. It's
100 pounds in 2 months. Oh
and
my
I have
I think it's just important to reiterate here. You didn't have to have him as your surgery. It just didn't work. It wasn't working for whatever reason, but there was no control over your body. You went to a different surgeon and you got the result that you wanted, and that's fine. That's, it's totally fine to have a situation like that not work out. Like I said, personally for me, I would not want somebody who doesn't have experience on a super morbidly obese person to do a surgery on what my body used to be. Like when I was super morbidly obese, I wouldn't have wanted somebody who's not comfortable with that type of body to do the surgery on me, or who is not well versed in it. That would freak me out. And if they were literally telling me I'm not able to do this, I would believe them and I'd go elsewhere, and that's fine. For whatever reason, it's fine. It's fine.
a friend who's like been looking for surgeons to do their top surgery.
Yeah.
And they're like in a larger body as well, and people they just say no, we don't do that on larger bodies. Like, it's very, very common. Like, if you speak to some trans friends who are in larger bodies who have been looking for this, it's extremely hard to find like a person who will do it.
Which
at
is
all.
so horrible because then you get in this position like you were in where you're considering letting this like really violent person put you in this vulnerable position and like do something to
Out of
like
desperation.
this out of desperation, because you've already waited a whole year for something where it's like potentially like a top surgery where it's gender affirming, or something like this where it's based on pain and a need. But I am glad that you waited and you found someone that was better for yourself.
I will just say to this, men who are, born men, when they're very fat, still have boobs. I'm just going to say it. I call mine the girls. Okay. I have boobs. Y'all know I do. And I'm not trans. So I will just say that. Maybe that can give a bit of a comfort. Comfort for some, horror for others. But it is the facts. So I don't know. I think in my opinion, it's weird to do a surgery like that if you're super huge, because it can look so unproportional, especially if it's, for like the look of something. It can be strange. I think intuitively, at least to me, it doesn't make as much sense. And I could see why a lot of surgeons wouldn't want to. But there will still be one that will. You know what I'm saying? And you just have to look. So, yeah.
Situation because
And I asked her, like, I heard there's so many risks. Like, can you actually name them for me, though? And she's like, I do this all the time on people on all sizes. Like, you know, it might take a little longer to heal. And, like, we have to make sure the anesthesia is, like, really good. But it's going to be amazing. You're going to love it. You're going to see, like, you have so much relief. I got you.
So the
I'm glad
only
that ended up being your experience.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
glad.
Me too.
In the nature of wanting to like
It is riskier to have surgery, but you know, sometimes you have to. I'm not trying to judge or anything, but it is riskier for sure.
smash with these misconceptions, I would love to ask you.
Okay, so they're moving on to a different topic, so we'll cover that in next week's video. Let me know what you guys think down below. I will talk to you guys again next week. Have a good rest of your day, night, whatever. We'll be back later. Peace.